Paradoxicality is an interesting thing. Everyone loves a good paradox. Some people love a good paradox, some people don't. But the strange thing about paradoxes and paradoxicality is that even when we do appreciate it and have an interest in it, we don't apply it to our lives. So it remains a kind of a parlor trick. Someone could demonstrate a fine paradox to us and we'd be duly impressed. And then that's it. We go off again. We forget about it. We leave the paradox as a kind of oddity, some kind of oddity. There are these things called paradoxes. We can't deny it. And they're very, very odd, and they challenge logic. And wow, that's amazing that what we thought was like the bedrock of our reality, which is logic, can be not just challenged, but turned on its head, completely thrown. Now, you might think that we would infer from the existence of paradoxes that if a paradox can overthrow or confound logic in one instance, that kind of means that logic as a whole, the whole structure of logic is itself not as strong as it presents itself to be, not as fundamental as it presents itself to be, and that we distrust all logic on that basis, which would be a great thing. But it doesn't, because we manage to compartmentalize it. Say, oh yeah, that's it. It's as if you could say, okay, well, that's a branch of philosophy, or that's a branch of mathematics, or that's a branch of logic. And then we're content because we put it in that paradox, and we don't think about or see the relevance of paradoxicality in our everyday lives. I mean, who does? Who do you know who sees the absolute relevance of paradoxicality in everyday life? Probably most people don't. I think it's fair to say most people don't. Even mathematicians or philosophers who might be very, very good at explaining paradoxes and give very many examples and versions of it, and can do a very, very good job of doing so, explaining this paradox and that paradox, the Barber paradox, which I can't remember, but I know it's a good one, or the Cretan paradox, which is in the Old Testament, which I can't remember either. But I know, very crudely, the Cretan paradox, you could express it or reformulate it and just say in a very simple way and just say, well, a Cretan comes up to you, can happen. You're walking down the high street, the shopping street, you're walking down, a Cretan comes up to you, demands that he has your attention. He maybe stops you in the street and shakes you by the lapel, and he informs you and he shouts at you and he says, all Cretans are dirty liars. Then off he goes again. So that's the Cretan paradox of biblical fame. But again, it's interesting, but who really takes that seriously? It doesn't really transform our way of looking at reality or our way of looking at life. And why should it, we might ask? What is this thing? Why does our way of looking at the world or our way of life need to be totally transformed? And it doesn't really need to be, because we can carry on just the same. And the reason I can say that we can carry on just the same is because that's exactly what we do. That's our number one superpower. Carrying on seeing things in exactly the same way, carrying on the same with no radical transformations. Of course we can do that. As I say, that's our forte. So we don't need to do it. But when we're talking about mental health, we can say that transcending our problems, our neurotic mental health problems, if we use that clumsy way of talking about it, in order to do that, we need to transform our way of looking at everything. Otherwise, we can't outgrow these problems. We can simply fight against them interminably, and that sometimes we'll think we're winning, and that's great, because everyone knows it's good to be winning in the struggle. That's the great thing about struggle. If you can win, it feels good because you're thinking, yep, I'm winning. That's the best thing. That's the best thing ever, really. And then there's losing, which is the worst thing ever. But if we're not transforming our way of looking at things, then it's just up a bit, down a bit, doing well, not doing so well, struggling successfully, struggling, etc., etc. We never free ourselves from the problem. We just play various games with it. So that's no good. It's tedious, and there's no growth in it. So we can say that mental health is about growing, not staying the same, not treading the same path, walking the same furrow, furrowing the same furrow, not doing the same thing over and over again. Everyone knows that isn't mental health, and yet that's what we do. Stuck in a rut is what they call it. Is being stuck in a rut, if that rut is particularly barren and sterile, mentally healthy? Not in the usual sense of the term, obviously. So if it's mental health, we're on about paradoxicality is important, because that's how things transform, is through an understanding of paradoxicality. As I was saying earlier, my memory is such that I can't remember how to set out proper mathematically defined paradoxes like Russell's paradox. But that doesn't really matter, because it's the psychological manifestations of paradoxicality that I'm interested in. So one really, really good manifestation of psychological paradoxicality that absolutely anyone almost can understand, it's like really simple, it's obvious, is to do with how we deal with issues. So we all have issues. Often people would say, oh, he's got issues. Or I might say, oh, I've got issues around that. Issues, all sorts of issues. And when these issues get severe enough, that's mental suffering. It can be very, very acute mental suffering, as we all know. So just to carry on with this scenario a bit, here's me with my issues, of which I have plenty, and one day a particularly big issue comes along, so I go and see a therapist or a psychologist or whatever, and the therapist says, okay, I'm going to help you with this issue, so pay attention, I'm going to help you. And they go on to tell me some way of dealing with the issue, working with it, CBTing it, maybe something like that. Here's what you do X, Y, and Z, and that'll make the issue not so bad. So far, that's straightforward. We can all understand that, and that is the basic formula for all rational therapy. You've got a problem, you do the thing, and that helps with the problem. You could write a book about that, couldn't you? Do the thing. If it doesn't work, well, try harder or do it for longer, whatever. But there's no paradoxicality in that, is what I'm coming at. We have not acknowledged, recognized, appreciated paradoxicality, the paradoxicality that is in that particular application of logic. And boy, is there paradoxicality involved in that particular exercise in logic. Boy, is there ever. There's so much paradoxicality, it would spill out, and it would, I don't know, it would spill out all over the place. It should just be, the more you try and fight against it, the worse it gets. Paradoxicality is like, once it gets out of the box, what are you going to do? Because everything you do has a paradoxical result. You want it to do one thing, it does the opposite thing. That's a paradoxical result. You want to be happy, you get really, really sad. You want to make things more peaceful, and you end up with the exact opposite of peace. You end up with interminable, torturous conflict. So that's paradoxicality. Now, the obvious thing about this is that if I have an issue, now the first thing to understand about an issue is it's an issue. It may not be an issue for you, but it's an issue for me. It's a thing in my head. But anything we try to do to make the issue less of an issue is feeding the issue and making it more of an issue. Of course it is. Like, in the simplest possible way, I could try and deal with my own issue and say, it's not an issue. I'm fine about it. It's cool. It's not an issue. So that's straightforward, non-paradoxical application of logic or procedural logic. But it's also total crap, because if it's not an issue, why am I saying it's not an issue? Because when things aren't an issue, we never go around saying that's not an issue. We only say that if it is an issue. And we're taking it more seriously. So to go to the trouble of denying that it's an issue means that it's a serious issue, and actually denying it makes it even more serious, because I've put more energy into denying it. So there's no way that we can remove an issue or work with it or step it down, because the more we try to fix the issue, the more we agree implicitly that it is an issue that needs fixing. So fixing doesn't fix issues, it creates them and maintains them. And that's very, very obvious. It's kind of almost childishly obvious. There was an advert on TV not so long ago. Really, really stupid advert. I mean, we live in a world of atrociously stupid, insulting adverts, obviously. But in this advert, there is some little kiddie, and he was frightened of the boogeyman under the bed, and his grandfather, I think they're trying to sell iPads or some crap like that. And the grandfather was on the iPad, well, doing face-to-face on the iPad, and he was saying, show me under the bed. And so the little kiddie puts the iPad then facing the bed, under the bed, and the granddad said, he's gone now, he's definitely gone. So you might think, okay, nice old granddad, he's being helpful. But he's not, he's being a total idiot. Because straight away he's agreed that there is a boogeyman. And so what if he isn't there at the moment? So what? He's going to come back a bit later, isn't he? Because that's what boogeymen do. So that is a perfect example of our absolute atrocious stupidity when it comes to dealing with psychological problems, psychological issues. We are absolute idiots. I mean, we have to acknowledge that. It's not a blaming thing. It's a state of our being, a state of absolute stupidity. That is our state of being. And if we can recognize that, that's great. That's really good. Because then we might open our eyes a bit and stop believing ourselves so much, or believing the thinking mind so much. So where this leaves us, this understanding of paradoxicality as applied to therapy, is that there is no way to fix psychological problems, because it's our attempt to fix them, or our belief that we can or should fix them, that is the problem. Now, that's a simple enough thing to say, but the implications are huge, because all we ever do is try to fix psychological programs. We have industries dedicated to the cause, such as our immense, incalculable stupidity. So what do we do? As soon as we see this, we realize that basically there is nothing that we can do, because everything we try to do about the situation makes the situation worse. And even if I get a little bit clever and think, okay, I'm going to not do anything, and that'll make that issue better, or it'll make the psychological problem better. Maybe I've got a bit smart, thinking, okay, I'm going to deliberately not do anything. But that doesn't work either, because my not doing is a way of looking for a result. My not doing is a way of looking for profit. I'm not doing for a reason, and so my not doing is another doing. I'm doing, not doing, but we can't do not doing, because if we do, it's a doing. It's not a not doing. We can't do a not doing. No one can tell us how to do it. You can't write a book about how to do it. There's no procedure for how to do it. Absolutely. And what's more, if we were to be really to the point about it, we would say that the ego or self-construct, which is who we think we are, obviously, can never do not doing, or can't not do, even if it tries very hard and does lots of yoga and meditation. It still can't not do, ever. And the reason for that is that the self-construct is itself a doing. It's not a naturally occurring thing, it's a doing. We do it. And the thing about this is, because everyone will say, I don't do the self-construct, or I don't do me. My me isn't a doing. We'll say that, but that's because we do it without letting on to ourselves that we're doing it. So we maintain the ego or self-construct, but the part of us that maintains it and does it is like the left hand, and the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. So the right hand can say, I'm not doing the self-construct. I'm not doing this idea that I have about who I am. But we are, we're just not letting on to ourselves that we're doing. So there's an unconscious doing, a reflexive automatic doing, whereby we do who we are, we construct who we are, we make it up. It's a game we play, or a mask we put on, or persona, or role we take on. But we don't know it's a role or a persona, and we say, no, it's not. It's honestly, it's sincerely me. I'm being sincere. It really is me. And that sincerity is true to a point, because the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. So the point is that the self cannot not do, because the self is a construct. It's a loop of self-reflexive awareness. It's a kind of little bit of self-consciousness. It's a little knot in a string. So we could say, well, in a manner of speaking, the string is real, but the knot isn't, because, or we could say it's like a wrinkle in a string. When you pull the string taut, the wrinkle goes, because it was never there. It was just an artifact. So nobody can not do. We can kid ourselves that we can not do, or we can try very hard to not do, but nobody can not do. The self has no capacity to not project itself, not extend itself, not manipulate, not control. There's no such thing, or not judge. There's no such thing as a self which doesn't control, no such thing as a self which doesn't judge. If the self were to stop controlling and stop judging, it would cease to be a self. It would cease. So then we can't say that the self is doing it, can we? And even if the self would want to be dissolving itself in this way, it can't, because everything it does to dissolve itself reinforces itself and makes more of a knot. Okay, thanks for watching.